Okay.
Okay, so now we move on to the next paper, titled Language Learning Strategies, E-Learning Self-Efficacy and Academic Dishonesty Among International Students at Asia Pacific International University. It will be presented by Mr. Roger O'Connor, Valenzuela, Dr. Darren Thomas, and Dr. Josephine Katenga from Department of Education, Asia Pacific International University, Thailand. So the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have thoroughly enjoyed your presentations. The time has come for me to share the research Dr. Darren, Dr. Katenga, and I had on this topic. This is a topic that really interests me, in part because of the overall theme that we have for this research conference, which is the new normal, basically. So how do we address these three variables, especially academic dishonesty in the context of e-learning, or I would call it forced e-learning, right? Because some institutions and teachers have been forced to go into e-learning, even though they were not ready for it. So a brief context of the study, we all know that academic dishonesty is a topic of growing concern. There's a lot of research on this, especially at the tertiary level. Plagiarism and cheating are also common among students who have low levels of English proficiency. So basically, I'm focusing on students who have English as their second language. I think there's a triple challenge for students, university students that have English as a second language. Basically, they have to continue learning English. They also have to adapt to a new lifestyle, which is college. And on top of that, they have to learn new content in the target language, which would be English. So that's what I would call a triple challenge for students who have English as a second language. And this is where language learning strategies come into the picture, because this is what students use to acquire English. So there are several definitions out there about language learning strategies, but most researchers agree, even though there are many definitions and similar, most researchers agree that there are specific practices, techniques, thoughts that students put into practice in order to acquire English. It was mentioned not long ago during this session that academic writing is also a challenge for students. Now imagine for someone who has English as a second language. That's not personally my case, but most of my friends here at Asia Pacific International University really struggle because they tell me it's really hard to write in English. And on top of that, to come up with a paper in English, that's also tough. So there's research on this, and many times I think students unintentionally commit plagiarism just because they are not comfortable with the target language. And we have that among freshmen and sophomores as well. So we have the problem of academic dishonesty also in the context of online learning. This was also mentioned during the sessions that we have enjoyed so far. How do we know that students are not committing academic dishonesty, especially in the e-learning context? How do we proctor exams? How do we make sure that they are not copying from their classmates? So that's something that we need to really look into: plagiarism and cheating in learning settings. And of course, academic dishonesty. This is something that has been looked into in Thailand, as you see on the screen. But I think this is something that we must revisit because it's an ongoing problem. So we have e-learning self-efficacy as a factor to consider. That would be how comfortable students feel with this new normal, where technology and using technology is so important. And of course, e-learning self-efficacy would be the ability that students have to operate with computers, use the internet to find resources for their classes, and work with learning management systems. I'm sure most of us are familiar with Moodle and other learning management systems that are out there. So the rationale for the study is the gap I found in the literature. The gap is that there are studies about how students relate to academic honesty, online learning, and English as a second language, but almost none of the studies I checked have done a correlational research on this. There's also a relationship between international students' English proficiency levels and academic honesty, but the study was done long ago in terms of research, and online learning was not included as a factor. And other studies have explored the association between language learning strategies and e-learning, but did not consider academic honesty issues. So I think there's a need for looking at the relationship between these three variables. And I would like to show you a conceptual framework of the study that I'm sharing with you. So basically we have language learning strategies, e-learning self-efficacy, and academic dishonesty. And I wanted to specifically look at two demographics here, year and major. What happens with students that come from different class levels and majors. So objectives to determine the Asia Pacific International University students' level of academic dishonesty, their preferred language learning strategies, and their perception of e-learning self-efficacy. That would be the first objective. The second objective was to ascertain the bivariate relationship among academic dishonesty, language learning strategies, and e-learning self-efficacy. And the third objective was to assess the relationship between academic dishonesty, language learning strategies, e-learning self-efficacy, and the demographic variables, year of study, and academic major. So international students were the target population, and from there, we got the sample for a study. I must say that here at Asia Pacific International University, we have more than, if I'm not mistaken, 33 countries from around the globe represented. So that tells you a little bit about the cultural diversity that we have on campus. We used convenience sampling. I think this is great when you have time and money constraints. So you just invite people to join the study as they feel comfortable to do so. And some of the demographics I can share with you. I have them right here. So basically, in terms of gender, ladies were majority, around 56%. In terms of class level, 27% of the participants were seniors, 26 were freshmen, 24 were juniors, and 23 were sophomores. So that's some of the demographics I can share with you. In terms of major, I would say that English majors, business majors, and education majors were majority at 25, 21, and 20% respectively. Other majors were thinly distributed. So survey was used to collect data. We are looking namely at a cross-sectional survey. So we gave the survey, students filled it up, and then they gave it back. Teachers and students were asked to distribute and collect the survey at different faculties and dorms, specifically among international students, because here on campus, we also have Thai students. We have locals who come and join, but there are Thai programs. So we have kind of two worlds on campus. The research instrument was divided into three parts. So we were looking at the first part, which would be the consent, the informed consent. Demographics was the second part, and the third part was the survey itself. We had three scales: the language learning strategy scales from Ardashiva and Treader, the e-learning self-efficacy scale from Zimmerman and Kulikowicz, and the academic dishonesty scale. I would say that the instrument was a bit too long, and I was afraid that students wouldn't want to participate, but I was happy to get around 225 surveys back. So that was a very, very good sample size. If we look at the overall population that we have of international students at Asia Pacific International University, which is around 500 students. So I would say half of the students were willing to participate in the study. So I used two different software with my colleagues to collect and analyze the data, Microsoft Excel and the open source software R. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but one good thing about R is that it gives you the Chromebox alpha of the data that you put into it. And that was very positive. That's one of the reasons why I used R. So the first objective of the study was accomplished by using descriptive statistics. The second objective of the study was accomplished by using relational statistics, namely Pearson correlation. And the third objective was accomplished by using relational statistics, namely multiple regression. Sorry, how much time do I have left, just to be mindful of that?
You have 5 minutes.
Oh, thank you. That's awesome. We're getting there. So academic dishonesty was the dependent variable, as you can guess. And of course, we were looking at independent variables like language learning strategies, e-learning self-efficacy, and the two demographic variables I mentioned before, namely year of study and major. So we made sure that our research was approved by the review board that we have here on campus concerning research. And we made sure that everyone who participated was willing to do so. So going into our results, well, I would say that according to students, their levels of dishonest behavior in the academic sphere is low, 2.12. Of course, we need to understand that people might feel like, hey, I don't want to say that I am dishonest, even though it was anonymous. So we could say that those were the responses. I can show you table 1 just to showcase some of the statements. The highest statement with a significant score was I manually pass answers in an exam. But as you can see, this is under the range of sometimes, because we gave them a Likert scale, a 5-point Likert scale, like never, rarely, sometimes, often, and always, almost always. So 2.61 is more like not really, but that was the highest one. In terms of language learning strategies, although students were somewhat neutral, I can share with you the scale in terms of items and what happened, how students responded to it. I would say that the 3 first items that you have on the table I'm showing you are what we call metacognitive strategies. So students who are aware of their own learning process, how they learn, how they understand themselves as learners. They seem to be very much into analyzing how they speak, analyzing how other people speak. Okay, that's something to keep in mind. And in terms of e-learning self-efficacy, participants demonstrated a neutral stance. So we have the third table here for you. The highest item, the item with the highest score was I submit assignments to an online Dropbox, 3.83. There are other items with significant scores, but like I said, this falls into the sometimes definition of the Likert scale. So second objective, the Pearson product correlation was calculated to ascertain the relationship between the 3 variables. There was no significant relationship between e-learning self-efficacy and academic dishonesty. But if you look at the relationship between language learning strategies and academic dishonesty, there was a weak yet significant relationship. And that's something that we will discuss later on. And there was a mild relationship between language learning strategies and e-learning self-efficacy. And I will also talk about that when the time comes. And you have a scatter plot here to illustrate the relationship between e-learning self-efficacy and language learning strategies. Regression results I would like to share with you. Basically, all 6 variables included in the study, but namely, the independent variables explain 15% of the variance. And it was found that language learning strategies significantly explain the variance of academic dishonesty. We also got that from the correlation that we saw earlier on. And another important finding is that the variable, wait, something is happening with my screen. Okay, year of study was an important predictor of academic dishonesty, with junior, seniors, and sophomore students having a high connection with academic dishonesty. It's very interesting that freshmen did not constitute a predictor of academic dishonesty, but all other class levels did. So that's something to look into. More findings. Nursing students were considered the major with the strongest factor associated with academic dishonesty. But this makes sense because our international nursing program just started last year. So the sample size was very, 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 very little in terms of the subgroup of nursing students. And lastly, e-learning self-efficacy was not an explanatory variable of academic dishonesty. So conclusions: international students at Asia Pacific International University showed low levels of academic dishonesty in the context of e-learning and language acquisition. Respondents preferred learning strategies that involved observation and self-assessment. That would be what we call metacognitive strategies, metacognition. Students were mostly neutral toward their perceptions of e-learning self-efficacy. Findings from other studies indicate different results. Other studies say that the more skilled students are when it comes to e-learning, the better they do academically, and the better they perceive themselves and their attitudes toward academic honesty. Another finding is the mild relationship between language learning strategies and e-learning self-efficacy. That means that students who use language learning strategies tend to also commit academic dishonesty. And this worries me, because I think that students who use language learning strategies shouldn't commit academic dishonesty, or should be less engaged in academic dishonesty. The notion that language learning strategies was a predictor is something that we need to consider. Maybe teachers really need to look into this and explain in the classroom that even though you do certain things to learn English, you cannot do those things when you submit a paper, when you go through an exam, when you take a quiz. So the last 2 findings are concerned with the relationship between academic honesty and demographic variables. I mentioned about nursing students already, and all other classes except freshmen being important predictors for academic dishonesty. So something is happening, I think, and I believe our university needs to look into this, that students who are moving from the freshman to the sophomore year feel free to commit academic dishonesty. And that's something that we need to fix. So I have several recommendations for students. I think it's important for them to be more skilled when it comes to e-learning and the tools that they need to have, especially using the online resources that we have in our library. For teachers, I think, like I mentioned a few moments ago, that they really need to explain in the classroom that using language learning strategies for acquiring English cannot be or shouldn't be a predictor for academic dishonesty. So that means that teachers need to say, maybe you can do this and this to learn English, but you cannot do those things when you take a quiz or when you write a paper. For administrators, I think they really need to look into this issue of sophomore, junior, and senior students being more prone to commit academic dishonesty than freshman students. And for further study, I think it would be nice to include academic stress as a variable into the conceptual framework I shared later on. And I think it would be important to also look at other universities and see how students respond to the research instrument that was developed for this study. Thank you, that's all.
Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you, Mr. Roger. Very interesting presentation, and I agree with you. Very, very important concern for most of the educators, these days. Academic dishonesty, especially in this in light of this new normal of online learning. Okay, let's open the floor first for any questions or comments.
Yes, let me ask Mr. O'Connor. You said that your respondents number was quite little, right?
I said that it was half of the population of international students we have on campus, basically half.
Yeah. Most of them, do you know most of them?
Well, I know many of them, but I don't dare to say most of them.
So how could you be sure of the accuracy of the data collected?
Well, I would say I personally did not distribute the survey just to make sure that, personal bias would get on the way. So I asked teachers and student leaders to help me collect the data. But as we know, when it comes to perceptions and how people respond to a survey, that's always subjective. So we can only collect from that.
Yes. And do they know that you are the project owner?
Well, I tried my best to not divulge that information.
All right. Have you ever experienced of this kind of academic dishonesty before?
I think for some of my friends, like I mentioned before, learning English and then adapting to a new system, which is the tertiary educational system. And then on top of that, learning new content in English, that can be quite a challenge. And many of them in my master's program, many of them came to me from the graduate and undergraduate levels, telling me, I really, really struggle when I have to prepare a paper or when I have to take an exam because it's not my first language. English is not my first language.
Because there's a loophole in there, right?
That's
so
right.
It's very difficult for us to do the protection. All right. Thank you for your replies.
If there's no question from others, I have one myself, Mr. Roger. I'm quite interested, especially in your finding regarding the weak but significant relationship between language learning strategies and academic dishonesty. It also comes as a surprise to me, and I'm just wondering whether you have any insights, perhaps, that you get from the students on why those students who are actively involved in class, using language learning strategies, are still participating in academic dishonesty when there's an opportunity to do so. Do you have any insights about that, like about the why?
I think when we talk about language learning strategies, we need to keep in mind that there are several. Sometimes social and effective strategies can be, I would say, the ones that students really, really connect with academic dishonesty. Like in the same way, my friend is teaching me a new word in English, or my friend corrects me when I say something wrong in English, oh, then my friend can also check my paper. So I think that's the kind of insight I got from students. Social and effective language learning strategies can get in the way, sort of speaking.
I see. So I guess it's like the blurring of the lines they are not sure, where the line between consultation or like you said, referencing ends and where the lines of academic dishonesty or plagiarism begins, perhaps. Okay, so
That's right, Professor.
Okay, that's quite an insightful finding. All right, thank you very much for your reply.
Okay,
Okay, so no question then.
right. I think we should move on.